This video contains the instructions for both the 1/12 and 1/24 coffin kit from Bentley House Minis. Please see the timestamps listed for the information you're looking for. Each kit comes with a set of instructions, 2 mat board sheets, 1 chipboard sheet, and 1 cardstock sheet. You can see the difference in the 1/24 scale at the end of this video. Start by removing piece A from one of the mat board sheets. In order to remove each shape, use a sharp craft knife to cut through the tabs, and then use the provided cotton swab to go around the edges, removing any remaining laser ash. You're going to use one piece marked A and one piece marked B. Add glue to the face of piece B and glue it on top of piece A. You're going to want to center piece B on top of A so that there is an even border around the edges. This is where you're going to glue the next pieces. Add something heavy on top to make sure that it dries flat. To create the walls of the coffin, you're going to need 2 pieces marked C, 2 pieces marked E, and 2 pieces marked D. If you're doing the couch version of this kit, make sure that you fast forward to that section, because this part of the construction will be a little different. You can use these pieces either facing out with the engraved lines or facing in. If you choose to have the engraved lines facing out, it will look like your coffin is made of individual planks of wood. If you have the engraved lines facing in, the outside of your coffin will have a smoother finish. Glue one of the C pieces at the head of the coffin and one of the C pieces at the foot of the coffin. Now you can use the E pieces on the shorter side edge of the coffin, adding glue as you go to every edge that will touch. Now glue both pieces marked D in the remaining long spaces on the side of the coffin. This should cover up the reveal that was created when you glued piece B on top of A. To create the lid of the coffin, we're going to use piece F and another piece marked B. Again, you can use either side of piece F depending on whether you want engraved wood planks or a smooth finish. Whichever way you decide, glue piece B on the back of the piece that you want revealed so that it is centered just like we did for the base. This will leave a reveal that will fit on top of your coffin. Once finished, make sure that everything fits. I have chosen to use the engraved lines on the outside of my coffin, but if you did yours reversely, it will look a little bit different from this. If you would like to make it look like there are metal pieces holding the wood pieces of your coffin together, take out all the pieces marked O from your cardstock sheet. I am bending these in half to make them look like brackets that are going to go on each corner of the coffin. Once they're bent, I can put them in place and make sure I like how they look. Once they're glued on, I can take an awl and add little details. This is of course optional depending on how you want your coffin to look. I can push into the paper and into the mat board just gently enough to create an indentation. These will look like small nail holes from where the bracket was applied. To make it look as though the front panels of my coffin are also being held together by metal, I am removing 3 of the strips from the section marked P. There are both thick and thin options. I am using the thicker ones for my coffin. These can be placed anywhere you like on the front of the coffin and can also be used on the side where there are not engraved lines. It's really up to you. I tried my best to give many options in this kit. Once the glue has dried, I can turn it over and cut off any overhanging edges. This is a great point to go ahead and stop and paint the coffin before adding any further detail. I always suggest using acrylic paint that hasn't had any water added to it. Any extra water could cause the mat board to warp. I also suggest painting on both sides of the mat board at the same time. This also helps keep down any possibility that there would be warping. Now I'm adding a metal finish on top of the base coat that I applied. This is going on top of any of the cardstock pieces I added, which were meant to look like metal brackets. Because I'm wanting my coffin to look somewhat older, I'm adding a dry brush of gray paint over the edges, making sure that it catches on to those engraved lines. I'm also doing a watered down wash. It's a little safer to use water in your acrylic paint once you have a thick base coat. While that's drying, I can go ahead and make my hinges out of section Q. Each one of these sets of 5 pieces makes one hinge. I'm starting by just cutting out the candy wrapper shapes and getting the fabric out of my accessory bag. The fabric is going to reinforce the hinge, so I'm cutting a really thin strip that will go through the center. I'm adding glue on top of one of the shapes and pressing the fabric down into the glue. Then I can add glue onto the other shape, turn it upside down, and sandwich the fabric in between the 2 shapes. This is going to reinforce the hinge so that it will last longer. Once that's glued down, I can take a sharp knife and cut off any of the fabric that's sticking out of either end of the hinge. This takes a little concentration and patience, but it really does make your hinge look nice in the end. While the glue's still drying, I'm going to go ahead and bend it in half or in an L shape so it can dry in the shape I really want it to be in. I also can add these details if desired. They are not necessary for the hinge to function. The 2 T-shaped pieces get glued on either side of the hinge so that it looks something like you see on screen, and then the long thin rectangle gets glued in the center, and this kind of emulates what a hinge would look like if you would see the exposed barrel. This is the final result of putting the details on the hinge. Again, these are optional and not necessary. Now I can go ahead and paint the hinges before I glue them onto the coffin. I highly suggest using some kind of gel super glue for applying these. Super glue will make it last longer than tacky glue. Before adding the hinge, I need to make sure that the lid is on my coffin in the exact right spot and where I want it to be forever. And then I'm adding glue just to the very ends of the hinge and making sure that there's no glue in the center so I don't accidentally glue my lid to the bottom of my coffin. Then I need to let that dry for a long time without touching it to make sure it doesn't come undone in the middle of the gluing process. While that's drying, I'm going to go ahead and work on a few handles. You have the option of 12 handles here. I'm only going to be using 6. These are in section N of your kit. To create these, all you need to do is bend them in a U shape and make sure that the outer edges are flattened so you have something to glue up against your coffin. I did a metal finish on these with some silver metallic paint, and I'm just going to glue them to the sides. There is another option for handles which you will be able to see in the Coffin Couch part of this video. Now that we have the outside of the coffin looking pretty good, we need to work on the interior. There are some upholstery options for this kit. For this version, I am only going to be upholstering the bottom of the coffin. If you want to see how I upholster the side, make sure to watch the Coffin Couch part of this video. For this, you're going to need piece J from your chipboard sheet and your quilt batting from the accessory bag. Glue piece J onto the quilt batting and then cut it out. You can use as many layers as you like or as many as you can get from the quilt batting sheet. You can also find other soft materials around your home if you want to make it really, really plush. For this kit, you need to provide your own fabric. I am just going to be using a very plain muslin to finish off this upholstery. I'm providing a 1/2 inch border around it once I've glued it on and clipping into the corners so I can easily fold the sides over. I'm adding a small amount of glue on the bottom of piece J and then folding the edges over the top so that it sticks into the glue. Once I've done that, I can clip off any extra edges and make sure to keep going around and folding, keeping the fabric tight. I try to do opposite sides so I know that I'm pulling the fabric in the most even way that I can. Then I'm going to dry fit and make sure that everything looks right before I permanently glue it in place. This is also a great opportunity to age the bottom of the coffin if you feel like this is going to be a little bit more spooky or a little bit more used. I'm going to leave mine nice and clean for its future resident. In section M on your chipboard sheet, you will see you have several different shapes provided. These are just additional decorations you could possibly use for the front of your coffin. For this example, I'm going to be using the skull and crossbones, and I'm painting it before I apply it so I have a really crisp finish. And then I went back and just aged it a little bit so it looked like it had been there for years. That's the end of the coffin section, and now I'm going to show you how to create the coffin couch. The beginning of the construction is very much the same as the regular coffin, except you will leave out one E piece and one D piece so that you have an open side for your residents to sit. In this part of the video, I'm going to show you some different things you can do with parts of your kit. The strips that I used previously on the front of the coffin, I'm going to be using on the edges. They are a little bit longer than before, so I can cover the entire edge of the coffin to make a cohesive look. You're free to do whatever you want with the pieces in this kit. I really love to see when people get creative. In the chipboard piece, I'm going to be using the long pieces marked L to create a border around the entire couch. I feel like this gives it a very finished look. I am pre-bending it around all the corners to make sure that it fits, and then I am going to add glue. I'm doing this on both the bottom and the top of the back of the couch. This also reinforces the walls just a little bit. To create the legs, I'm going to be using all the pieces in section I and all the pieces in section H. Each leg consists of 3 H pieces and 2 I pieces. First, glue all of the H pieces together so that you have a triple thick shape. Make sure to get all the edges as close together as possible so that they're matching. Then I'm going to glue both of the I pieces together, making sure that all of my edges match up. Once those are dry, I can glue the back of my H piece and slide it into the slot in the I piece. I will show you a closer up view of how this looks once it's put together. This gives a wider gluing area, so it's more likely that your leg will be very well stuck to the bottom of your coffin. You can also use this on the regular coffin version if you would like. I am now flattening it on my desk so that the leg is sitting straight up, and I know that it's completely flat while it dries. Now that I have all 6 legs, I can add glue to the very top and glue them wherever I see fit on the bottom of my coffin couch. You can use 4 legs or you can use 6 legs. It's up to your design preferences. Once they're all glued in place, this is how it looks. While the legs are drying, I highly suggest setting it flat on your work surface to make sure that everything is even while it dries. This is a great point to go ahead and paint the base coat of the coffin couch before moving on to adding any other details. I'm going to be using black with gold highlights. Again, there's so many different ways this can be painted and so many different ways this can be decorated to really make this project your own. For the couch specifically, I wanted to create the huckles. You can find all the pieces in section G, and you will also need one of the Q-tips from the accessory bag. All of the pieces you see here will come together to create one huckle. I'm going to start by using the pieces that are rounded and gluing them together so I have a double thickness. Once I have 2 of those glued together, I can add glue inside of the rectangular piece, and that is going to be where I put the previous pieces into the hole so that it comes in contact with the glue. I'm making sure that I insert it fully so that it lines up on the back and is flat on the back. That's where it will be glued to the coffin. I do that for both sets so that I end up with 2 brackets that are going to hold my handle or the huckle on the side of the coffin. Those are going to be glued to the sides, and at that point I can kind of decide how long the handle part of the huckle is going to be. If you would like a longer handle, you can use a dowel or a barbecue skewer that you might have around your house. In order to apply the Q-tip, I'm going to cut off the cotton ball edges and then make sure that it is the correct length and then cut off the other side. Then I can insert it into the holes, making sure that everything is lining up. Once that's lined up, I need to glue it in place. The easiest way I have found to do this is to move the Q-tip to one side, add the glue in place where you think it would be once it's put back into the center, Move it back into the center and then swirl it so that glue gets all inside of the hole that it's sitting in, and then let it sit there and dry. Once it's dry, you can go ahead and paint the handle, and this will complete your huckle on the side of the coffin couch. You have enough to make 4 of these. Now that the outside is complete, we can go ahead and work on the upholstery. I am again using piece J from the chipboard sheet and covering that with the quilt batting from my accessory bag. I'm cutting the edges off and then adding as many layers as I can or want to. Specifically for a couch, you want the cushions to be a little bit fluffier, so I suggest at least 2, although I'm pretty sure I did 3 for my couch. Finally, I'm adding my self-provided fabric onto the top. Remember to use minimal glue for this because you do not want the glue soaking through your fabric. I'm cutting it so I have a 1/2 inch all around on the border, and then cutting into the corners so that I can easily fold it over the side and glue it down. This is the same way I did the upholstery for the first part of the video when I upholstered the bottom of the coffin. Once I'm happy with how it looks, I can add it onto my coffin couch. I highly suggest not gluing it until you have all the pieces ready to be added to the couch. In order to create the side upholstery, I'm going to be using the pieces from section K on the chipboard sheet, and I'm going to be marking how long they need to be to cover the edges. I'm using 2 short pieces for the sides, and then I'm bending 1 long piece for the back of the couch. If you're doing this for the basic coffin, then you want to just do the same thing, but you will have 1 more side to upholster. These are upholstered in the very same way as the bottom. You're just going to want to glue it onto the quilt batting and then use minimal glue to glue it onto your final fabric. Fold over the edges and then you will have a finished piece. This works pretty well on the back piece because you have a very minimal bend. I don't find that there's too many problems with just slightly bending it so that it fits in place. It doesn't really, I haven't found that it wrinkles the fabric very much. So I just go ahead and upholster it like a long rectangle and then bend it to fit. I glue that one in first and then I add my sides, making sure that everything lines up, and if I have any little edges sticking out, I just add some glue onto a toothpick and carefully push them back in place. Here are my finished 1/12 scale basic coffin and coffin couch. The 1/24 scale kit is pretty much the same with the same pieces and letters, but there are a few differences, so I'm going to go over them now in case you ordered the half scale version. You are going to get 2 chipboard pieces and 1 cardstock piece in order to construct your kit. It's very difficult to reinforce the hinges in 1/24 scale because they are so small and they get really bulky. So you will not find any fabric, but I have provided the hinge shapes in case you do want hinges for decorative purposes. I've also provided the huckles, although the Q-tips won't fit in this scale. So instead I'm providing a large paper clip so you can create the huckles from metal. Here's what the 1/24 scale looks like compared to my hand. And it goes together in the very same way. You can also see the 1/24 scale couch, again very small, and in this version I used the hinge shapes for decoration on the back instead of using them as actual hinges. Since the huckle construction is a little bit different, I'm just going to show it to you here. I'm lining up my paper clip to see how long I can create my huckle, and then I'm using some wire cutters to cut off the paper clip pieces and then putting it in place. I glued it the very same way, where I moved it off to the side, added glue, and then swirled it around in the hole. Once it's attached, I'm going to go ahead and paint everything. I even painted the huckles once they were glued as well because the pieces are so incredibly tiny. The bracket pieces go together in the same way they do for the 1/12 scale kit. And this is what it looks like in the end once the huckles are completed. Because I used gray and black for this one, this did end up looking a little bit like Batman's coffin. Here's the final look for the 1/24 scale coffin couch. I think it came out really well. I used white and a brass metallic finish for this one with a floral print. Those are all the changes you're going to find in the 124 scale, so if you need anything else, you can go back to the 112 scale version instructions. If you're interested in purchasing this kit or any other kits from Bentley House Minis, please visit bentleyhouseminis.com and click on the Shop tab. If you do complete one of these kits, I'd love for you to use hashtag BentleyHouseKits. I always love to see what you create. Bye!